As society became more and more integrated with technology, popular and classical music styles are continuing to diverge. With the invention of technologies like the radio and the record player in the 20th century, music has become more and more accessible than ever before. Using these new technologies, artists like Elvis and the Beatles paved a path for popular music to take on a life of its own. They used new kinds of instruments like the electric guitar and the electric keyboard to create a sound that no one had ever heard before. In addition, they also used things like TV and radio to broadcast their sound all across the world. Since then, popular music has evolved into tons of different styles like rap, R&B, rock music, and so much more. Today, this has come to the point where artists can make a full living off of just rearranging sounds and not even learning to play an instrument. This can be seen in super electronic artists like Porter Robinson, but it also has a place in modern classical composers like John Mackey, who never actually learned to play an instrument besides piano. One of the main ways that classical and popular music are different is in the way that they're performed. When you go to a rock concert, you're right in the action. People are dancing and singing and screaming around you. The performers are jumping around on stage, and there's people crowd surfing, and it's crazy. Oftentimes there's a whole visual component to the performance as well, with a light show and sometimes fireworks and lots of decorations around the stage. And if you pay a little extra, you can even meet the performers afterwards. Now, if you compare all of that to a classical performance, you'll realize that it is not the same at all. When you go to see the symphony, you sit with the audience in a dark, quiet space while the performers are 30 to 40 feet away from you, dressed in all black. While this is really different, it's not necessarily bad that it's different. A lot of times the goal of classical music is to have the listener be more self-reflective or kind of taking a look at some of the deeper aspects of humanity. Whereas popular music a lot of times can talk about a lot of the more mundane, surface level things that people deal with on a day-to-day basis. Even though the way classical and popular music is performed is so different, they're both great ways to present music. Another way that classical and popular music is really different is in its instrumentation. Classical music uses a lot of the same instrumentation, that being strings, brass, percussion, and voice. On the other hand, popular music uses a wide variety of instruments, whether it's just electric guitar, electric bass, and piano, or even things just such as nature sounds. The many different types of instrumentation in popular music gives a huge opportunity for new types of sounds that have never been created before. And even though lots of people claim that is the reason why popular music is so interesting, classical music has just as much variety, if not more, too. The next difference between popular and classical music is in the role of the musician. Now, in popular music, most musicians write their own music. They write everything and produce it. Now, in the classical world, musicians often just recreate works of amazing composers that have come before them. There are obviously lots of brand new composers, but the majority of classical musicians only perform. The upside for popular musicians being able to write and create their own music is that there is literally no limit to the amount of different sounds and combinations they can create. But on the other hand, classical musicians have pretty much the same amount to work with too. Because there's over 500 years of music to draw upon, classical musicians have tons and tons of resources that they can take from and reinterpret into something brand new if they choose. Another difference is in how music is notated between popular and classical music styles. In classical music, musicians use staff paper, which allows them to recreate and reproduce the sound that the composer is trying to have them do. This is different in popular music because popular musicians often use layering on software to just stack up a bunch of different parts. So rather than recording each individual one on paper, they take pre-recorded bits of music and splice them together to create something completely original. Last but not least, another difference between popular and classical music is in the education and knowledge of the performer. Classical musicians often have to go through years and years of extensive training to get to the point where they can perform at a professional level. Without this extensive training, classical musicians would not be able to recreate complex historical works. On the other hand, popular musicians often don't have a lot of formal training in their music. Even though lots of them start playing at a young age, It's rare that popular musicians go to school for music. Instead, they often learn by doing and by creating. Even though they wouldn't have the skills to recreate some of the music that classical musicians are able to, their lack of training almost enables them to create music that is entirely different. Now, after looking at all of the differences between popular and classical music, what are some similarities? The biggest one, right off the bat, is that recordings are easily available to all audiences. Using things like Spotify and Apple Music, people of all ages and all nationalities can listen to whatever they want, whenever they want. The accessibility of this allows for people to be exposed to all kinds of music. The next big similarity is in how classical and popular music are used in other forms of entertainment. These other forms of entertainment can range from movies that you would see in the theater to TV shows and even things like dance. Because of this, both music styles are used to achieve the same purpose. Another similarity is in the message that classical and popular music is trying to make. Everyone knows that all music has an underlying message, whether that's about the deepest parts of our humanity or about the world around us. Even though their styles are totally different, this really brings both genres together. Last but not least, one of the main similarities between classical and popular music is that they were both extremely innovative for their time. In the same way that Bach revolutionized the music of the late Baroque era, the addition of the synthesizer in the late 1960s has allowed for the creation of a totally new genre called electronica music. Knowing all of the many ways that classical and popular music are similar and different allows you to realize just how unique and special they both are. In addition to this, being aware of all of these factors really shows you that classical and popular music have a lot to learn from each other. While classical musicians could certainly learn a lot from popular musicians by taking a lot of the instrumentation and a lot of the aspects of creating their own kinds of music, popular music also has a lot to learn from classical. In the same way, popular musicians could definitely benefit by learning more in depth about the history of music and the theory behind it as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you want to hear more from us, then click here to subscribe and click here to read more. Be sure to leave a like and let me know down in the comments section what is your favorite type of music. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.